All right, we are live. Simeon, I brought you here to talk through your recipe site. But first, I wanted you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. I'm a full stack developer. I'm originally Australian, but I'm living in the UK now, up in the far northeast. And I'm the head of development at an agency here in the UK called Under 2. And we make really fast websites. But I think what we're going through tonight is one of my side projects, because I sort of relentlessly build widgets and all sorts of other things on the side as well. And this is kind of one that I spent more than a small amount of time on and has kind of taken off in recent times. So, yeah, that's kind of my story.
Yeah, and you deserve to be proud of that. So that's pretty good. I mean, Hiki, I'm a developer from Brazil, working mainly with Sanity. And yeah, we are both trying our first time doing a live stream. So let's see how that works. Okay, so the specific thing that we're gonna talk about today is, let me see. Okay, it's Simeon's recipe site, as you can see. It's a very minimalist and nice looking design, but the really interesting thing about it is that he designed and built the content structure based on how could recipes online be better. So for example, you can convert, as you can see here, we are doing cups, but we can convert that to weight. And now, I guess,
Don't tell me that
doesn't work.
Did we?
It's probably.
When did it break?
Probably Firefox. 1 second.
No, it's funny. I went and updated a whole bunch of stuff yesterday, but it's not like I've got a test suite or anything running on it. It's a side project. Oh, how embarrassing! Well, how did nobody test that before launch?
That's okay. Let's see if at least the Celsius and Fahrenheit are working.
Imagine those units converted before your eyes. Yes. Hey, those ones work. There you go.
There you go. So you see 177, and it goes to 350 Fahrenheit. So we got that right.
It's a side project, all right?
It's a side project.
And it works about as well as one should.
Yes. Okay, so with this in mind, I'm going to hand over to you to start talking about how this idea came about and the funny story behind it. So, up to you.
Yeah, so I think because, like so many people that are locked down wherever you're from, we love to eat out, but there's only so much of that you can do during lockdown. So I've been heading to the kitchen because you can't spend your entire time on the computer. Need to find some respite, can't leave the house, might as well try and take up cooking. And so that became a hobby of sorts, particularly over like the New Year's break time there, time off work, trying to stay away from the computer to an extent, and cooking in the kitchen. And for our agency's Christmas breakup, we did a live cooking session with a live chef. And it surprised me, even though what we made was so good, it surprised me how difficult it was to follow his recipe. And I guess once you've got a developer mindset, not that we're special creatures or anything, but I think we could look at anything and make it look like a bunch of React components, or we could look at any amount of text and turn it to JSON. So it's just looking at his hand-scrawled collections of ingredients and instructions and things. The whole time we were making this dish, all I could think about was, this is JSON data and React components just screaming to be put together. And so I guess while we were cooking, I was building this website in my mind. So shortly after it finished, and it led to a lot of chaos and potentially some mishaps, which I'm not sure if any of my colleagues want to share in a public forum. But it just led to some confusion. What we cooked in the end was terrific, and it was a lot of fun, but just the frustration of what could be well-organized data being so poorly organized was really tough to get over. So I built this whole site in my mind during that cooking session, and I had to just go and build it immediately after. So I kind of spent the New Year's break then building all of this out. And I know that Sanity is like an excellent data store and data structuring platform. So that's clearly what I wanted to use there. But also was looking for an excuse to use Next.js on the front end as well, which is what this site uses on the front end to handle all that data live and build those pages statically.
Yeah. So I imagine you started off with this componentization process first. Like you as a user, the design process was like, how could this be better for me? But then right away you started abstracting that out as a bunch of React components and the data structure. How was the design process of that?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like visual design, I like to design in the browser now. I'm not sure if you're a fan of Tailwind CSS, but I feel like, or if you've used ViteJS, the bundler. Vite is this super fast bundler, and Tailwind CSS just will give you the styles that you want without having to think about writing CSS. So in terms of visual design, I've really given up on Sketch or Figma. They feel too slow. Because I want to build the components that I have in my mind, and I don't want to draw them first and then try to code them later. So in terms of the visuals, that was all straight into the browser. But definitely, I had componentized all that in my head beforehand. And you're right, like visualizing that from the user side. So how could ingredients, because this was all data, right? How could ingredients, amounts, methods, and references to those ingredients in the methods, how can that be better stored into a set of React components? How can that be assembled in a list of components? And how can those things be related to one another? Because in most recipe websites too, and I kind of explain this in the blog, most recipe websites, ingredients and methods are separate and they're never referenced to again, where it seems silly to me that if you have all of that ingredient data, why wouldn't you reuse that data again later in the method? And that's what I wanted I think that's the biggest thing that this project does, which I haven't seen anywhere else, which is just retelling you what the ingredients are while you're reading the method, instead of having to scroll up to the ingredients, scroll down to the method, up, down, up, down, up, down. So I think of all of the tweaks and things that I've done, I think that's kind of the most useful one, and that comes from structuring that data and making sure those relationships are shared.
Right. Yeah. I guess I should probably show that. Here. This part.
Yes.
So when you're in the method, you reference as an editor the all-purpose flower, so then it shows up here. And especially, I guess, on mobile, I don't know, I didn't see how this looks on mobile, but the fact that you have
I think it's X, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's better than nothing. Yeah. So this is what you're talking about, right? The contextualization of each method to make sure recipes are faster to create. Yeah.
And that's still live data as well, so that the amounts that are being referenced there, in an ideal world where this project works, they will update with the amounts of serves, with the weights and measurements as well. That doesn't even work locally either. It's so broken. Well, yes, but that's live data as well. And I wanted to make sure that was useful too. So these aren't just like fake relationships or stale data. The ingredient data alongside the method is straight from the ingredients. That was an important consideration.
Yeah, that's perfect. All right, so from this, if you could walk us through the schemas or the data modeling that you made for these. And I know, for example, the density of each ingredient, you're including that in the specific ingredient documents, and I wanted to see how that all of that is tied together. If you can.
Yeah, sure. Do you want me to share my screen, because I can show you the Sanity Studio there? What screen do I want? I want this one. So this is the Sanity dashboard, which hopefully is clear enough to see. But this is where some of the most useful parts with the ingredients come about. And again, one of just the things that I wanted to see solved was that, you often in recipes, and I'm not a great cook, so maybe there's reasons for these things, and that's why I hope I'm not like, cooks are probably saying, well, these aren't actually real problems. But to me, like, a lot of recipes will give you the measurement of a solid object in a cup, and I don't know what it means to measure 1 cup of butter, because butter doesn't fit into a cup. So
unless you melt it, but then
yeah, that's right. But then you might melt way too much.
Yes.
I've got this disconnect in my head about that. But you can Google the name of any recipe, of any ingredient rather, and ask how many grams 1 cup of that is. So why not just store that data? And so that's where, again, when it's working on the front end, you can switch between weights and cups, because cups are these volumic measurements for solid items. So as long as that data is stored somewhere, you can do, like, it's just math. You can do the math to show those things.
Right.
And so, like, yeah, a lot of recipes are just, like online recipes are just strings of text where there's no reason why they can't be disparate pieces of data, which can be then, multiplied, divided, converted.
Yeah.
And that's what Sanity gives you, is the ability to do all of that. Some of the other things too that I made sure that ingredients could have was alternative names, because I was looking at what are the things that when you're doing a recipe, you have to keep going back to Google for different things. And one of those is weight conversions, temperature conversions, and also alternative names. So like American recipes will say corn syrup, but that you can't get that here in the UK. I don't know if you can get that in Brazil. They might have a different name for it there, right? But I bet right now, if you typed into Google corn syrup, the next word would be alternative. So like these are commonly Googled things. You can surface this information on the front end, and I think that's here. So like I put these modals in that you should be able to get all the information that you need for a recipe right there on the page when you're looking at it. So that's some of the things we did with ingredients, and I'm talking business talk. If I did you want to have a look at some of those components as well through the library? I don't want to jump ahead.
Yes. Let's do the data modeling first, and then you can show the components, but then I have a very specific question about the implementation of them, which is very interesting.
Well, let's kind of look at the schema. I hope the schema is not too difficult to read, because I did use something which hasn't really caught on.
Typed queries?
Not typed queries. I have published a plugin called sanity-quick-fields. This is something which I use a similar thing for this in advanced custom fields in WordPress, where I find that the schema docs in Sanity can get really, really verbose needlessly, where often if you're just defining like a string of text, all you really need to do is just give it a key, and you can do a case conversion, like change the name to title case. So I've got this package that I've used pretty liberally through this project, where I just want to rapidly create schema. So these won't look like your typical schema files, but you can see those ingredients there. So I have the ingredient schema, category schema, which is kind of standard. Then there's the recipes schema itself, which again is filled with these quick fields objects, which have so the data modeling, like we saw in that recipe, there's that millionaire shortbread recipe is made up of 3 recipes. Really, it's the shortbread base, the caramel, and the chocolate topping. So I knew that recipes really need to be made up of multiple parts, and you could probably take that to the extreme and have like a recipe part schema, and that your recipe is just the assembly of those 3 parts. But not every caramel is created the same. Not every shortbread's created the same. So even though you're using shortbread in this recipe, you might not want to use it all the time. So I sort of made the conscious decision you're kind of going to have to recreate. Every time you write shortbread, you're going to have to put together shortbread ingredients and shortbread instructions. But I guess you could almost get to a conclusion where you're making like a Lego set of food, and then you could make like a recipe of any combination of parts that you wanted to, and bolt it all together. But
recipe generator.
But that could lead to some really dangerous outcomes, right? Because maybe you're making like tuna shortbread or something. First thing that came to mind.
Gross.
But so that's the recipe data model there.
Right. So basically, instead of doing a specific document, you chose an array of objects, because then, aside from what you said, also it's a bit faster for the context, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, if you want to open the ingredient set for the shortbread.
Got a validation error here too. So yeah, these are the different sets of ingredients because you are preparing 3 different amounts of things, and I think it's helpful to organize these into different parts. But this is also how it enables those method steps to work, because once they're in an array, they can be referenced again within the document. And this is part of the things that, this is part of one of the custom components. Again, I'm not sure if I'm jumping ahead, but it's the great thing with Sanity is that every array object gets its own unique key, which can be kind of used like a document ID inside of that document. So what I essentially had to build later inside this document is a set of references to array items within this same document. And so, yeah, like when you would build a reference, so like a category reference in Sanity is usually, it's a reference to an ID. This is a reference to an array key of one of the arrays inside of this document. And so that's how we can set up these array items and then reuse them inside the document.
Yeah, this makes sense, for example, in the context of a pricing table. Say you have like 3 different plans, and you could, from each feature, you could choose which plan it's applicable to, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think you can probably observe that in like the data in the back end is you could have a look at the array. So it exposes the key for every one. So it's kind of it doesn't feel like such a hack because it feels very Sanity-like, I think, because their whole thing of like a reference is just an ID. My interior references are just a key. And so they'll follow that array item through the document. And it means if I update, how much, maybe there's less than a cup of brown sugar in future, then that would update through the document as well, because it's only referring back to that initial ingredient item.
Right. Yeah. Can you walk us through the custom component you made for that?
So the component here, so in the method, I created this array with 3 different objects, and that is that I think it's titles, steps, and components, which don't call a component because it begins to get difficult to track. But so this is the custom component I made to track those in-document references, I sort of called them. So here, this array is just generated off of, it's a custom component that checks the document, goes and has a look through that ingredients array, and then returns this checklist of all those array keys. So now I can select in this step of the method, which is, what are we looking at here? So in this step of the method, which ingredients are in play, and you can just select those. Now, if I was to add an ingredient or change an ingredient or something in that array at the top, it would, I could update that here, or it would update the amount, and it would keep that linked. Because I guess when you're making custom components, you want to make sure you're writing as little data, I think, as well, to the document. Like if I had if you were manually storing these amounts again in this array item, those could easily get out of sync. But because it's only referring back to the initial key, it stays in sync with those initial keys. So that's this custom component, but there is the other one for conversions. I could show you that one.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And hopefully it works. I mean, given the given the way we're going. So this component was one of those fun and frustrating things to build. I think I rewrote this component 3 or 4 times, just because I started to, again, like I said, I think you want to save as little content as you can. What I initially did was I saved every variation of every amount that you put in. So if you put in 1 teaspoon, it would save in an array object. All these different things and like labels and amounts and everything, and it would output this huge object in return. But that became problematic because it could get out of sync. You would need to go back and update that and save. I can't remember the exact explicit case, but I had an issue where data was getting out of date because I was saving too much to the value of the field.
Right.
Where it was best just to store, I think I just stored these 3 values and just the numbers of them as well. And it sort of knows if it's an imperial volume, it will be this. If it's a metric volume, it'll be milliliters. And then I think I called these standard or something. But it knows, it only knows as much as it needs to. But I also then had sort of a consideration about, I was doing a lot of the unit conversions on the front end, but the unit conversion library I was using was really heavy. It was like a 50 kilobytes or something, because it does all sorts of different unit conversions. So then I made sure that I wanted to pull that out of the front end, because that seems like that's ridiculous to load that on the client. So then I had to sort of, I think I went, all the way of having all the conversions in Sanity, then all the conversions in Next, and then I sort of landed somewhere in the middle where there's just enough information stored in this component now that the heavy conversion happens in Sanity and is saved, but then a lot of the dynamic data is done on the front end with as little information as possible.
So if I'm getting this correct, vanilla extract has its given density, like grams, 1 cup equals how many grams? And then
the 1 cup to grams had to be stored on the ingredient, because that is determinate to the ingredient itself. And I'm sure it's a vague measurement, because here's the hidden truth too, is that cups are a vague measurement. The difference in cups around the world is different. I went down this rabbit hole of looking at unit measurements on Wikipedia. Did you know smidgen is an official official unit of measurement?
What?
I didn't, and now I do. But yeah, so I'm storing. There you go, fuzzy. That's what I called some of these things, because then you get into like, is it 1 onion? Or, is it 1 apple? So they're just quantities. But then pinches, which are these indeterminate amounts, which don't need conversions, and so there's a lot of this conversion happens here in Sanity. Hey, this one works. That's good.
Right.
But the cups to grams one had to happen on the front end.
Right. So you're pulling from vanilla extract, or no? You're just, I see. So you're just converting the 1 teaspoon to 4.93 milliliters independently of vanilla extract.
Yes, here these are just
volume to volume.
Yeah, this one here is just straight units of measurement. No, nothing to do with the ingredient, because I could change this to butter and it wouldn't matter. Right. But the what does 1 cup equal in grams? The cups to grams. That one relies on there being a gram measurement for every ingredient, which I've just gone and added as I've added a recipe.
Yeah. So you're just converting volume to volume or weight to weight, depending on whatever system you use, and then in the front end.
Sorry, that was something I really wanted to do here as well, was make sure that you could insert any measurement and just get back whatever you wanted. So that can be frustrating. You read some recipes in fluid ounces and some in milliliters, but I wanted to make sure that it didn't matter what dimension you used to enter amounts. It would always just give you the right conversion after the fact.
And this can also internationalize much easier if you want to build an SEO powerhouse of your recipes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could do some. You could really very easily do geocoding and geolocation and serve fluid ounces by default to US traffic, and that would really become quite easy, I suppose, at some point, because all of those conversions are already done, and you would always be serving localized content to localized visitors, which would be pretty cool.
Yeah, that would be very, like every SEO would be super happy about that. I wonder, did you use Sanity UI for building these inputs, or you just imported the parts from?
I did start using Sanity UI. Have you used Sanity UI at all yet?
Yeah, a couple of times. I'm not super expert, but
I'm sort of curious your thought. I think it's a really excellent thing that they're doing. But if I can say this, it feels really early. Like it's the documentation is really light on. I found like even the text entry box looks nothing like the current sanity text entry box. I thought, like, I would have thought that'd be the first thing you'd do. And I'm not trying to throw shade. It's just like, and that's cool that they're putting it out there, and I'm sure that it's going to really improve over time. But I did try to use the Sanity UI as much as possible, but I found it didn't look enough like the rest of the Sanity dashboard yet. Like, I think like for this converted here, I used one of the text labels, but it sort of doesn't really look like anything else on the page. So right. I'm looking forward to Sanity UI maturing and getting into every part of the dashboard, so that when anyone builds custom components, they just look like part of the dashboard.
Yeah, same here. I guess, yeah, everyone, and I can imagine all the potential it has, but like you said, it's still in beta, so oh well. I was wondering, like, if you can go back to the other components where you choose the ingredients for a given method, how did you pull those references to render this? I saw the loading state. Are you fetching? You're going through each key and then doing a query from Sanity data store and rendering.
Yeah. So every component can get access to the document that it's looking at. So what are we looking at? That is the ingredient picker. I imagine. Ingredient picker. That sounds right. Yes. So every custom component has access to the entire document. I have not looked at this file in a long time. Let's hope it works. So yeah, I think I did a lookup on all of those keys and managed to find them by ID and pull them in. I'm really not sure where that happens. But yeah, you can see the loading state. It must go into a client fetch request, I think. It's found the ID there. So we're finding out together. There you go. So I'm doing a client fetch and pulling all those IDs in. So it's a really cool feature of when you're building a custom component, is that you get access to the entire document. So it means you can really very easily interact with the current data in the document. So yeah, that's just going and checking what are all the IDs of all of the references. Because yeah, that's right. They have array keys, but they are just IDs, right? So I think what I'm doing is just scooping up all of the IDs out of these ingredient sets and then running a query for all of the ingredients that have those IDs. So yeah, that's why you've got that loading there for a moment, but then it just pulls in having finished that request, which is nice. I mean, you get that when you do a reference too, like you get that Ajax request sort of waiting screen, but it's just probably a bit more obvious there because they're all checkboxes.
This really, I've been thinking about kind of similar problem. I'm building an A/B testing component where you can get each page that you are adding to your test, and then add what's that called? Just a knob to choose, like, oh, this page is 25%, this other one is 75%. And then for this, I need to pull these references and get the document to do the preview. And I was thinking how you were doing it. So you're basically querying from Sanity, having a list of all IDs of all ingredients and their specific titles, and then just matching them to whatever is in the checkboxes, right?
Yeah, that's right. You can just pull the client from. That's going back into the website. I don't know why that's happening. I'm pretty sure you can fetch the Sanity client from the studio side. That's really bad. Don't look at that. But you're right. Like, you can just run any client against the data in any part of the UI. So that's how you would just go and fetch additional data. But I think, just like, I know I sort of labored the point before, but if I had have saved these as IDs of the ingredients, I wouldn't have been saving all of the data about that ingredient in this recipe. So if I had just stored this ID, then here it would have just said brown sugar. But because I've stored the key of this array, I know it's actually a quarter cup of brown sugar. So it's not just the ID of the ingredient itself. But being able to query the entire data set within the component is how you would need to get those sort of richer interactions between documents.
Yeah, makes sense. This is great. What would you do differently?
I wouldn't break the demo the night before showing it on a live stream. I'm going to have to fix that as soon as we're off this. I'm going to fix that. What would I do differently? I'm really not sure at this moment. I think I wouldn't have called components because that became really just confusing in my head at times. Like I said, I think I would have debated more perhaps these ingredient sets being actually their own schema, because it feels a bit more sanity-like to do that, because of like these ingredient sets are a complex enough thing where they probably could be their own document. But then maybe you get that context switching difficulty of moving between documents to edit those things. So that's much of a muchness. But I think like any side project, like you just go on, and at some point you've just got to stop, right? So I think there's infinite room for improvement. Like we've even said, like geolocating people and serving them their preferred unit of measurement before they've indicated what their preference is. Like that's amazing, and that's probably like 10 lines of code away from being done. But it's time for all those things, you know. Yeah,
absolutely. You got your job and your kids, and
that's I think from like December 25th to January 1st, all I did was work on this thing, you know. Like I think I spent pretty much that week off work just smashing this idea out of my head, because once you're in it on a project like this, it can be hard to let go. So I think I just had to let go and move on to other things at some point.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for your time, Simeon. I'm gonna put this on YouTube and do some timestamps for us to refer back. This is a really amazing project, and it really shows what is possible when you have React right together with your data store in this really extensible CMS. And it got me really excited about this recipe site that I've been trying to pull off for 2 years now. It's just being like in the limbo side project. Actually,
had a few people reach out. Like I think it's sort of it's instigated a bit of that. Like I had another developer reach out who was in the middle of building a recipe site and really wanted to look at the code, and it's been really interesting. And I think like a really nice recipe website went up in the Sanity community there the other day, and I loved I don't know if you saw, they had a timer on the page. Because if it says, cook this for 15 minutes, you click the timer and start it in the browser, and that immediately kicked me off. Like, that'd be amazing to build, and you could write the time of the local storage so it'd survive a reload and all this sort of thing. And your mind starts racing to build this new thing that you don't have the time for. But I thought that was very, very cool. I would love to see this in like a real commercial product, because there's a million bad recipe websites out there. And I think if there was, it's been a fun side project to sort of get noticed and all that sort of thing, but I think it really is still probably a reasonable foundation for an actual project. So I'm kind of waiting for the right food blogger to come along and say, can you actually turn this into something? Because I think that sort of the groundwork's there.
Good luck. I hope you do get that. If anything, if you have a lot of time to spare, you can try building it into a platform like specialized WordPress for recipe sites. Like there are many examples out there. Like I just saw the other day, there's like a job board, CMS specialized in job boards, and it does everything for you. It seems like there's a lot of market there. But if in any case you got featured on CSS Tricks, which I guess was a first, which seems nice.
Couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I imagine. All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for your time, dude.
Yeah, and have a good one. Bye-bye.
All right. See you later.